How are you doing? I'm just going to start.
You can start. We're all here. 7 of us are here. 9 of us. I'm doing great, actually. Now that I'm all over this technology, I'm riding it like a fast pony down the range.
Yes.
You know how my metaphors are, Kim, so they're a little corny, I know. I'm fine. I'm doing great.
So, we're doing this as a way to get to know you, a little bit more about you, and also to have some virtual time with our San Diego rep family. So I've always wanted to know, even though I know that there are written accounts of how you founded the theater. I know you were the co-founder in 1976. And that was back when it was not the Lyceum as we know it now, but I believe you were doing shows in downtown San Diego in a burlesque theater. Is that correct?
No, you have to go back even 2 more iterations before that to get to the beginning. Yeah, you're referring to the original Lyceum Theater.
Right. And then before that.
Well, the beginning was we noticed that the local city, we meaning Doug Jacobs and I, Douglas Jacobs, and his girlfriend Willow Mann, noticed that the City College Theater was empty, so we went to the dean of City College. Now, mind you, we had ratty jeans and T-shirts and really long hair, and we said, "Hi, Dean, we see you have a theater. Can we use it this summer?" And the dean said, "Who are you?" And we said, "Well, we're a company." He said, "What's your name?" And we looked. We said, San Diego Repertory Theater, that's our name. And we more or less made it up on the spot. And the dean said, "Well, you're a not-for-profit corporation, aren't you?" And we said, "Well, we could be." And so he said, "Well, when you're a not-for-profit corporation, come back and talk to me." So we sat down on somebody's floor and borrowed not-for-profit corporation papers from 3 different theaters, including the Provisional Theater of Los Angeles, for anybody who goes way back in history. And we wrote our own bylaws and our own articles of incorporation. And we went back to the dean 3 weeks later and said, "Yes, here we are. We are really San Diego Repertory Theater, Inc." And he said, "Sure, you can use the theater." And we said, "How much?" He said, "Well, how about $1 for the summer?" And we said, "Sounds like a deal." So he let us use this empty City College Theater, which is a beautiful theater. And we made 3 plays. The opening play in the summer of 1976 was that incredibly provocative, incisive comedy by George M. Cullen called "Keys to Ball Paint." And it was a comedy set in an ancient inn in New England in the middle of winter. And that's important because the story I'm going to tell you, which is very short, so it was opening night, the very first production of our company in history. There was a red curtain. Behind the red curtain was this giant 2-story set that was a hotel in a New England inn in the grand old tradition. And our tech director was painting the handrail of the grand staircase as the audience was waiting for the curtain to open. He was a little behind schedule. So he was literally finishing the paint job of white paint on the balcony, the stairwell that went up to the 2nd floor. So finally, we announced, "Welcome everybody, here's the first show." We opened the red curtain, and the wind blew, and the snow blew, and the sound of the snow over the sound machine, and the doors opened, and a very old lady and her son came in big weather gear and hand gear and caps on, and put their hands together and blew on their hands and said, "Well, I guess we better open up. Mr. So-and-so's coming next week." And the mother said, "Son, you take care of it down here. I'll go upstairs and start opening up." It was shut for the winter. And she put her hand on the rail and started walking up the stairs. And her son said something to her. And she stopped and turned around and she said, "What, honey?" And her gloves were completely covered with white paint. That was the fresh paint off the rails of the grand staircase. And our director was backstage putting the can on the top of the can of white paint, putting the lid on. So that was the glorious beginning of San Diego Repertory Theater. That was at San Diego City College. We did 3 plays. We did about 60 performances that summer. We borrowed $4,000 from Willa Mann's grandmother. We paid everybody, and we paid her grandmother back at the end of the summer. We made like $4,200
Oh, wow. What were your
in
expenses?
profit. Oh, I don't remember that, but everybody got paid. Was always the case, and we paid grandma back, and the dean of the city college says, you can keep the 200. So we ended the summer with a big profit of $200, and we said, damn, you can make money doing theater. Let's do this again. So that was what we thought. We were 24, maybe 25, I guess. 26, something like that. It was a little fuzzy. Anyway.
$200 can buy a lot of beer.
$200. Yeah. Well, for a while, people were living on Cheetos and Cokes, and the Cheeto diet is not conducive to long-term stability, as any theater consultant will tell you. So we came off that diet many decades ago. So that was the first play, and then we found an old funeral chapel on 6th Avenue, which we completely renovated and painted. My father built the little marquee out front, which is still there, and that became the 6th Avenue Playhouse, which became St. Cecilia's. It was a funeral chapel, and we had that building from 76 to 86, and that building included an exorcism. We had a secretary who was a Latinx woman, a devout Catholic, who swore there were ghosts in the building and evil spirits, so she brought a priest in who exorcised the building one day. And after that, the shows got much better. In 1982 or 81, Ernest Hahn and Pete Wilson, the former mayor of San Diego, the former governor of California, walked around downtown and said, there were a lot of porn shops at that time, and they said, we should tear all this down and put up a mall and build a wall around it so we can keep the rest of the world, and everyone will come to the mall, and their life will be changed forever. In the middle of this footprint was a theater built in 1912 called the Lyceum Theater, which was an old vaudeville house. Now, when Ernest Hahn, who was the biggest shopping center developer west of the Mississippi, and Pete Wilson walked around San Diego and had this little tour, the Lyceum Theater was showing a double bill of Deep Throat and The Devil and Miss Jones, the famous 2 pornography films of the 70s, and they've been showing it for 7 years. So nobody had the idea that the Lyceum was worth anything. And that started a long process of someone buying it and putting on the Lyceum Follies, and we performed in the old Lyceum downtown, which is exactly where the parking lot for Horton Plaza is. If you drive in F Street, like you're coming through downtown, and you go in the F Street entrance, imagine there's no parking lot, and you go about a block, and there's the old Lyceum sitting right there. Next to it was the Horton Grand Hotel, which was demolished brick by brick, taken down the street, and re-put together there in the Gaslamp Quarter, down by the Horton Grand Theater. So,
wow.
Obviously, I could go on, but...
Well, listen, you said that you did an exorcism of St. Cecilia's, but I will say that Sledgehammer moved in after you, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
And they claim, I remember Janet Hyatt Shahi telling me that there were still ghosts there. So maybe you didn't quite clear the air.
I have to say, those of you who have worked in a theater late at night and been in the building when the stage is empty, it was spooky sometimes, late at night for sure. But made it more fun, It was
totally. So Sam, fun. Let me ask you, since I know that you went to college in Santa Barbara, so you did leave San Diego, even though you're from Coronado.
I was born in Coronado. Yeah, I went to UC Santa Barbara.
But you wanted to come back. You decided not to do the New York or LA thing. You came back home. Why?
Well, what happened was I went to grad school at California Institute of the Arts, and I was offered a job in Australia at the University of Adelaide in Australia when I was like 21. And I said, wow, this sounds cool. I'll go to Australia and teach theater. and the guy who offered it was legit. He was the head of the department. So I graduated from CalArts early. And a few months before, I called up the registrar, and they never heard of me. They said, "Who are you?" And, and I said, "Well, Wal Cherry hired me." That was his name, Wal Cherry, hired me to come here and teach. And they said, "Well, Wal's in Japan." And I said, "Oh, great. How do I reach him?" They said, "Well, we don't know. He's on an extended mountain retreat for several months." Now, this was before email and before the internet. So
They did
the
have
guy who
phones,
hired me,
though.
they did have phone, but I didn't know how to reach him. I mean, I was 23 years old, So a phone call to Australia was like a phone call to Oklahoma. It's like the same thing. So
Right.
anyway, so I didn't get that job. So I came back to San Diego where my parents lived, and I ran into these guys who were doing street theater in Balboa Park in Zorro Gardens, which is next to the Reuben H. Fleet Space Theater.
Right.
And there's a stage down there. And so we did this group is called Indian Magic, and we did absurdist, ridiculous, political, left-wing comedy in the park and panhandled for quarters. And at the end of an afternoon, stacked the quarters up in nine towers, one for each of us plus one for the company. And we did that for a couple of years.
Wow.
And yeah, we did a lot of outdoor sort of crazy stuff. A famous commedia called Pee-Pee's Revenge, and a famous quasi-Shakespearean piece in honor of the Globe called Corn Dogs on Parade, about the history of the world as seen through the corn dog. We had a number of comic writers in the group, so we had really good. We did rent parties too. We had a rehearsal hall downtown above where Hooters used to be on the corner of 4th and Market. In that building, we had a rehearsal hall, which we put on rent parties there. And we'd name them after the time of the month, like such as December 7th, A Sneak Attack Upon Your Mind, in which we did a faux tribute to the USS Arizona and Pearl Harbor, and our big fat guy played the ship. And we had an actor dressed up as a fake veteran who protested our apparent disregard for respect for the military. It was all inside kind of. And then we did a peace sign called On Groundhog Day, in which we dressed up a guy as a groundhog, dug a hole in Golden Hill, and the groundhog ran all the way down Broadway, and we videoed him up the stairs of the hall and burst into the room to protest that indeed the guy giving the lecture on whether the groundhog stays up or goes down was exactly wrong. And so the groundhog came in to recorrect the history. So we had I don't know what you'd call it, sort of a crazy, ridiculous taste at that time.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely sounds like it. And I'm wondering why the Corn Dog Show never made it to the rep season, actually, or the Groundhog Show for that matter.
Well, we thought we were going to be famous. We had guys in the group who thought we were going to be on Johnny Carson. They were convinced. And some of us said, I don't know if Johnny Carson wants to hear the history of the world as seen through the corn dog, but maybe. He never booked us. No.
So
anyway, after all of that, yeah. Anyway.
In your memory, Sam, what was the hardest part about starting the rep? The hardest part and the best part, or were they the same thing?
The hardest part was always wondering if anyone would come to see the shows, but that was quickly alleviated because we were quite popular right away. You have to know that when we started, which was at City College, which I started, when we started, there was no fully year-round professional theater in San Diego. The Globe was part-time pro. La Jolla Playhouse was in their hiatus. A number of the theaters that are here now were not here. Lamb's Players was in National City. So there was not a contemporary professional theater. And we simply thought, well, it seems like a fertile ground to found a professional contemporary theater that does plays about the world that we live in today and the world that's coming. Because change was happening, certainly in the mid-'70s, early '80s. And we wanted to be a part of that change and in some ways shine a light on the future and be part of the Renaissance of San Diego. So what's the hardest part? I don't know. Probably raising money continues to be the most difficult thing to do.
Sure.
Um, or maybe better put, the balance between ambition and uh, aspiration and what appears to be reality. Because if you only live in what appears to be reality, you'll never really climb the ladder. You'll never get to the top of the mountain. But your aspirations have to be supported. So it's a constant dance between the dream and the knock knock on the door of reality. Um, I guess that's the hardest part.
Yeah. Um, well, with that in mind, I'm sure that having run the company for, 40, almost 45 years now, has taught you a couple things about resilience. And especially now when things are really hard for a lot of people, especially in arts and culture, we just don't know when we're going to gather again. And certainly the news seems to be changing on a daily basis.
Sure. Yeah.
What kind of lessons did you glean from these decades of leading the rep that are helping you stay resilient?
Well, at first, I think it's important to say that the time we're in right now is unlike any other. I'm not prepared. I haven't been trained for this time. None of us have. So this is a brand new ball game, as it were.
Yeah.
It's a fact, being a theater that continues to live in between that sort of the what might appear to be a safe place, but usually not. More often to live towards the aspirational place, where you're constantly, reaching for what I call a higher ground. That reach, is something that can be a little scary at times, and you're not sure if you can reach the next, if, shall we say, hole in the side of the mountain as you crawl up the mountain. If you've ever mountain climbed, sometimes making theater is like mountain climbing, in that you have to put the tiniest amount of your toe in a little crevice and hope that that amount of security and your balance, your experience can give you the courage to take the next step or reach the next step. So, I suppose it's also true that I always felt that we were trying to do something for the people of San Diego. I like to say for the place that I call home, because it is my home. I was born here.
Yeah.
My family still lives here, and that I really believe that what was once a collection of small towns with no here, as Gertrude Stein said about Oakland, there's no there. There was no downtown in the 70s, and this idea that San Diego could step forward, step up, could become the 7th or 8th largest city in America, could become an amazing theater town, could be much more than the zoo, the beaches, and the military. This idea that it could be a metropolis, it could be a cultural haven, could be a destination for culture, was something that always motivated me, and I felt was a civic act. I mean, I have always felt that I am and we are citizens of this place, and we contribute to the health of this community that we live in, and our job is equally as important as a fire person or a policewoman, and that we are contributing to the emotional, psychic, and if you will, visionary health of the community.
Yeah. So with that in mind, I mean, I don't know if this question is even answerable at this point, but it seems to me, you've done a lot of thinking about the role that San Diego Rep plays in the city and also in the theater community at large.
Sure.
What do you hope that the Rep can continue to do, and maybe even in this new world? How do you envision us participating in this?
Well, you said the words new world, and there's the question. What is the new world? What does it look like, first of all? Who's on stage in the new world? The old
Right.
world was mostly people who look like me. The new world is mostly people who don't look like me. Um, that's just on one level, but it's a very significant level.
Yeah.
Um, and then the other question of this global village that we live in, this multilingual world that we live in, that we are all connected, as we see now in this pandemic, and that perhaps it's our job to become more enlightened about this new world that we live in. Maybe that's our job as a theater, to be part of the energy towards greater knowledge, greater consciousness, if you will, more enlightened, which to me, knowledge is power, is more knowledge. It's what I call reaching for a higher ground. That the more I'm able to turn my head and see multiple points of view and contrasting points of view, and frankly, the more that I see debate and discussion and even argument about this world we live in, about the society, the more I'm encouraged that there is an rising tide of consciousness happening, and that I believe we've been one of the leaders of it, and I'm proud to be part of it, and I hope we may continue as such.
Yeah. Well, then let's imagine that, we return to the new version of what this world is going to look like. And in this new version, we are producing theater. And people are gathering and people are coming to the theater again. What would you want to, what's on your directing bucket list? In other words, like now that we can sort of sit back and contemplate the kind of art that we want to insert into this quote unquote new world, are there projects that you are specifically interested in?
Well, it's one to say what's the directing project I want to do, and it's something else to say what kind of plays do I hope get written. And I think I'll start with the latter, is that plays that write about this fusion that's happening, this new world, this that we're closer together, and plays that embrace the past and the present at the same time. We just did this play called The House of Joy,
right,
which is written by Madhuri Shekhar, a woman who was born in the U.S. and raised partially in India. She's an Indian American woman. The play sounds like a contemporary hip conversation, but it's set in 1666 in Delhi, in a royal harem, and it's a feminist play about women taking care of women. So it had all these elements of the past and present. It had a fierce progressive agenda, which is something I firmly believe in and will stand by. It's in our mission statement, the word progressive values.
Yeah.
So theater that can, if you will, embrace and recognize the traditions of the past and also speak about the future, the time we're in now. And my bucket list, I was thinking about that question today, and I'm always interested in what's yet to be written. But on that note, I can certainly say I'm looking forward to the next play Herbert Seguenza writes that I might be able to direct. I'm going to putting my pitch right now for that on this call. And I would love to direct Destiny of Desire, the play by Karen Zacharias, that we've had our eyes on for years, that we've all seen now. A fabulous piece of international theater. And probably a production of The Good Person of Szechuan by Bertolt Brecht at some time. I think I need to do that play.
Ooh. All right.
So I'll stop with that. They're big. They're big shows. I like big things. To do big.
So,
I got lots of people in the room who don't look like each other. I like that.
So okay, you've named a couple things. What about people? Are there specific people that you want to collaborate with, or maybe people before that you want to invite back besides Herbert?
Oh my goodness. Well, yes, Herbert, of course. I'd love to see Culture Clash back on our stage for sure.
Me too.
I'd love to see Jeff Meek on our stage. I'd love to see the work of Karen Zacharias on our stage. Soon we're going to see a piece by Octavio Solis on our stage, so that's good. Um, oh goodness, the list is probably long. I hadn't really thought about that question, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
I'll
All
leave it at
right.
that.
When you look around San Diego, and as we all have, there's just so many young theater companies now, which is really wonderful. And
That's
even, when I moved here in 2004,
yeah,
that was actually the birth year of a lot of companies. Actually, I think it may have been 2004, 2005, but like
yeah,
Signet, Moxie, they were all just starting out. Um,
yeah,
and clearly that even though that was just 15 years ago, it feels like a completely different it does feel like a completely different world now. What kind of
yeah.
advice would you offer to someone who was interested in starting their own theater company, or has started, and what would you say to that person?
You just made me realize that when the companies you mentioned started, we'd already been in existence for 30 years.
Yeah.
Just made me realize that. What thoughts would I say? Well, I think a new theater company is completely dependent upon the passion of visionary leaders. Completely dependent on it. I think it's occasionally true that citizens of a community, gang together to form a theater, but more often there's a Craig Knoll. And more often there's a Blake McCarthy, who started Blind Spot Collective.
Right.
Not alone, with someone else too, right? I don't want
With
to lose
Catherine
sight. Pardon me?
with Catherine Hannah Schrock. Yes.
Great, thank you. But without Catherine and Blake, there is no Blind Spot Collective. Now, you look at Blind Spot Collective and you say, fabulous. We've always needed them. What they're doing is unique. It's special, it's committed, it's deep, it's profound. There is no Tuyo without Patrice Amon and the other members of her leadership team.
That's right.
Theater is not the profession, and theater companies are not the businesses that you found if you want to buy a really large boat and spend a lot of time sports fishing on your 40-foot boat, because A, you won't have time, and B, you won't make the money to do it generally. There are a few people who have been blessed by Broadway success in our profession who've made a lot of money, and that's wonderful. But for most of us, it's a thing we do because that's really what we want to do. Some of us can't do anything else, but it's because we are thrilled by the experience of an audience in a room with actors telling an important story. And that occurs if there are some people, and usually it's more than one, two or three ideally, who bond together and say, let's make this happen. Let's go make this happen. You got to know what this is. You got to be able to describe what this is, and you have to be committed to it. And you also have to be good at it now. Now you have to be good at it, because this is a very town with a lot of competition, and by that I don't mean negatively at all, but there's a lot of theater activity in this town. I was trying to remember Pat Larner. Pat Larner used to tell me she would see like 300 productions in a year, and my head would just spin around and think, my God.
Yeah, on
So,
a typical week, pre-corona, on a typical week
yeah,
for Jason and I, we would see up to 3 or 4 shows a week.
yes, absolutely. And there's much more than you can see here now than ever before, and much more diversity of it now. And this is there are people moving to San Diego to work in the San Diego theater scene. Well, when I was growing up, everybody was moving to New York and Los Angeles, and San Diego had this amazing inferiority complex, you know, really, we lived in the shadow of Los Angeles, and, we were proud that we didn't have the smog, but we were jealous of some of the cultural world there. Now ours is incredibly active, incredibly diverse, and extensive.
I also find that the philanthropic community that
Yes.
supports theater has also grown, and their taste
Yes.
has also become more sophisticated. So
Yes.
the
Yes.
the standard of work that the theaters in town have to produce continues to get higher and higher, and it's a wonderful thing. But I do wonder, and I think I wondered this obviously before Corona, but will there be a saturation point with theater in San Diego? What do you think?
Well, I've been asked that question for when I started the company in 1976, and there was hardly anything. People would say, "Do you think there's room for San Diego rep in San Diego?" And I'd say, "Well, yeah, I think so." And then every 10 years, someone would ask the quote, "Oh, there's a lot of competition out there." And yeah, good theater begets good theater. You know, the more the better theater we have, the more better theater we have. It just is there such a thing as oversaturation? I don't know. Are there too many beaches in San Diego? Are there too many animals at the zoo? I don't know. I don't think so. Um, I'm again, if you have a vision and if you have a message and an idea and the ability to deliver something that's distinct and maybe unique, there's always room.
Well, then let me ask you this, because I'm gonna I've always been curious. So just to give a little background, you came up to me about working for you a few years ago at a
Mm-hmm.
panel discussion because I spoke up about EDI, and clearly that resonated with you.
Yeah.
What as we look forward, and really, I guess also when you look back on the people that you've hired to work with you, um, what do you look for? What do you want in as part of the inner circle of San Diego Rep? Like, what kind of people do you get drawn to?
Well, certainly people who care about diversity. That almost goes without saying, but I should say it for the record. If you don't care about it, you shouldn't work at San Diego Rep because it permeates everything we do. Um, EDI and certainly inclusion and diversity is central to what we do. I was distinctly proud of the cast of the House of Joy, and I'm just going to leave aside quality for a moment, which was very high, but the diversity of that group of women and men on stage was astonishing, not
Yeah,
only to me, to a lot of audiences.
yeah,
And a message is sent when you see a cast of 9 people, and all of them are people of color, and they're from cultures from all over the world. So I'm interested in people who are interested in the world and the many colors of the world and the many voices of the world, and who are I just thought of something that as my brain will do will shift over to. There was a phrase we used to use in one of the decades of our existence, of which there's been 4.5 almost now.
yeah,
The phrase that we're not interested in reconfirming preconceptions. We're interested in discovering new perceptions.
right.
And that it's interesting to me how audiences love both. We did a musical last summer called 33 and a Third House of Dreams, which was a parade of hits from the 50s and 60s. That was just the most fun in the world to actually uh, watch. It was a giant.
Yeah,
Loved it, and it was a throwback, a look back at something very, very special for the time, and didn't have anything to do about the future or now. Um, Sorry, my phone's ringing. There we go.
yeah, we're losing you. Okay.
Did you lose me?
No, I think you're back.
Okay. Oh, my just rang. I don't know.
I spoke too soon.
I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
You can't hear me? You can't
No,
hear
I
me?
can hear you. I can hear you. You're still pixelated, but I'm hearing you.
I'm pixelated. Wow.
Well,
So
at
much
least to
makeup
me,
and
I
I'm
don't know
still
about everyone
pixelated.
else, but for all I know, everyone can see you bright and clear on their screens.
Yeah, I can't, I don't know what that's about. Okay. Well, you'll let me
Dave
know
Rivas,
if I need
Davis
to do
rug.
something.
All right. Well, you were about to say something, though.
I was. What was it? What was I talking about? Oh, the tension between preconception and the reaffirmation of preconception.
Yes.
The tension between discovering something new, like House of Joy, which is definitely a new experience for people, or seeing 33 and a third, which makes you feel so good because you flooded with nostalgia and memory.
Right.
Both the theater can, there's room for both, and the theater should embrace both. And I'm always struck, and of course my preference is for that person who says, like the woman who saw Culture Clash in Bordertown years ago and said, I never knew that San Diego was such an interesting place to live, after Culture Clash had done a piece about San Diego and Tijuana. Interested in discovery, if you will, discovery,
Yeah.
and having a blast, as Frank Galati said.
You know, one of the things that I really appreciate about the artistic team and really everyone at the Rep, but particularly our artistic meetings, I think anyone who just is an observer would watch us and think that we didn't like each other. But the truth is that we all really support and respect each other's views and opinions so much that we're not afraid to disagree, and that we are often, I wouldn't say at odds with each other, but that we have such distinguished points of view that will
Yeah,
sometimes come up against each other, but ultimately, to me, those conversations just bring the best results as far as talking about the art and talking about the values that we have, and what we
yeah,
want to communicate and espouse in the work that we do. And to be frank, I mean, I didn't really have those conversations anywhere else. And I think there's a fear at first when you disagree with someone, that you don't want to be confrontational, and it's not necessarily confrontational. And I just want to say that you have created a room when we all meet, and now it's a virtual room, but you've created a room that is safe, but also where dangerous ideas can come through, because you have really allowed all of us to be as open um, and also as inquisitive as we want to be. You know, that
yeah,
you allow us to have the questions that are sometimes really difficult to ask, like, is it okay to do, to have Herbert in a dress, for instance, like those kinds of questions,
yes,
and to
right.
really unpack those questions. And I really appreciate that. Um,
Yeah, yeah. You make me think of two things. One is the phrase at the end of our mission, which statement, which took us a long time to come to, believe me, that San Diego Rep feeds your curious soul. That the artistic staff meetings are about the manifestation of curiosity, and we're all curious, and I'm curious about how people who are different than me think and what they think about something. Um, and that's why I love the diversity of the people in that group that we meet with every week, um, because this is a diverse group of men and women who come from very different backgrounds and traditions and histories, but all love theater and all love quality, and all want to be sure that we're representing, in an equitable way, the world that we live in. And then the other thing I'll share is something that um, Amiri Baraka said to me many years ago. I think it was like 1996 or 95. Now, Amiri Baraka was a black man who's no longer with us. He used to be called Leroy Jones. That was his name. And he wrote a play called The Dutchman, which was one of the early 60s powerhouse plays about a black man meets a white woman on the subway. And Amiri became this major voice in African American writing and letters in America. I was privileged to go to his house once, and there was a poem from Langston Hughes on his wall, signed and sent to Amiri. Anyway, Amiri said to me when we were doing a play of his that we almost didn't do it because he got arrested for protesting. Got arrested by the Newark police, and he was like 16. He was still in the streets. He said, "The difference between you and me, Sam, is you got to know about you, Sam, but I got to know about me and you." And I've never forgotten that, obviously. It was a big eye-opener to me, and it's sort of guided a lot of my thinking for many, many decades that, you know, that other person over there doesn't necessarily think like I do, so how do they think? And what rises from disagreement? What rises from curiosity? Perhaps it's more wisdom, I hope.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. What he said actually speaks to an experience that I think, well, I will only speak for myself, but I know from conversation that a lot of POCs and a lot of women have this experience of walking around the world, navigating the world, and being very conscious of our otherness and our,
Yeah,
the fact that we
yeah,
are not white, that we are not men, that we are not a particular, person. And
sure.
I think part of the beautiful thing about the work we do at the Rep is that we forge ahead artistically with that in mind. Like it feels very, when we talk about the art, when we talk about the work, it is with an ear towards that idea that people of color and underrepresented communities are just have an additional layer of struggle basically in navigating the world. And so once again, I just want to say that that is something that I really value in our conversations in the artistic meetings. Well, you know what? Believe it or not, we're coming on about, I think, 10 more minutes of screen time. So I'm going to try to finish on, well, actually, um, if you had, this is the final question, maybe. If you had, Sam, something you wanted to communicate to the theater community of San Diego, given what's happening in the world today, what would it be?
Oh my goodness. I guess just to say that through solidarity, we are the strongest, and that it's just a joy to me to see us support each other and come to each other's work and praise each other's work and work at each other's theaters and recognize that we are all citizens of San Diego. This is where we live, and this is really the people of San Diego are the people we make theater for. And to be proud of that and to assert that our citizenship and our role is central and important in the lifeblood of this community, because it is.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I think we all need to hear that. I hope, and I want to be optimistic, and I want to say that we're gonna all get through this, and we're gonna come out of on the other side of this stronger. We're gonna be transformed in many ways.
Yep.
But I think the thing that I will always come back to is this shared love for this art form that
Sure.
that quite honestly, if a person's not a theater lover, it's hard for me to truly connect with them.
That's funny, Kim.
Well, because it's a language of mine. It's like, the term love language. It's like a love language. It's the way I see the world. It's the way
Right,
I engage with the world. And if someone
right.
doesn't understand the value of that live storytelling, then it's hard to come to some commonality in terms of values, actually. But I believe that, when all of this is done, that is going to be the thing that unites all of us, and that will ultimately pull us through together, is our love of this art form. And
Yes.
I do think that, you know uh, this term was used a lot when I was at the Globe in reference to Craig Noel, that he was a living treasure, and I also believe that you, sir, are a living treasure,
Well, thank
and
you.
that San Diego is super lucky to have had someone who could tell the story of the universe through the corn dog.
The history, actually, the history
Okay.
of the world through the eyes of the corn dog. Yeah. Now I'm thinking that's not a bad title. Thank you. Thank you. The corn dogs are still in my blood somewhere, unfortunately, but they're there. Thank
All
you.
right,
Thank you.
Sal. I think I'm going to wrap this up. I want to say thank you to everyone who joined us. And
Thank
Celeste
you.
Liza just agreed. She says you're a living treasure too. See, it's not just me. And we're so happy to have had all of you watching this. Thank you. And Sam, I will see you tomorrow at our first early virtual meeting.
You will indeed. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Be well, stay safe. Go to the theater when you get well, when we get well.
That's right.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye bye.
All right, guys, I'm going to wrap this up. Let's see here. And I have instructions on how to save this conversation. So I'm going to look at that. Thank you so much. That was a lot of fun. Isn't he a blast? I'm telling you guys, he's amazing. I have so much respect for him, and I feel so fortunate to be working with him. Okay. All right, guys, I am going to, okay, top left. Let's save this. How do I save this? Sharisa, help me out. But I'll see all the rest of you later, if I just know how to end this. All right, bye.